I am Marcus James Dixon, and this is Rob Licuria. We are senior editors at Gold Derby, and we are pleased to be joined by the one and only Adam McKay, the writer, producer, director of the new Netflix film, Don't Look Up. Adam, the film is finally out. It's on Netflix and it's in theaters, and it's also in the Oscar conversation in a lot of different categories, which we'll talk about later. First, let's just start at the beginning. How long have you had this germ of an idea in your head, and why do you think now was the right time to tell it?
You know, it's something that's been just rising and rising and building for the last, since Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And then really when I was making Vice, I started to hear like the IPCC report from the UN. I started reading things. I started seeing things in the world that were really distressing when it came to the climate. So I started looking for a movie about the climate, and I had about 4 or 5 ideas. One was a big, dramatic, dystopic idea. One was more of an M. Night Shyamalan sort of thriller idea, and none of them were quite right. And I just was having a conversation with a friend of mine, the journalist David Sirota, and we were commiserating about the lack of coverage of the climate crisis, literally, scientifically speaking, the biggest story in human history. And yet you can go through the TV channels on the news and never hear anything about it. And he said, oh yeah, it's like an asteroid's gonna hit Earth and no one cares. And I was like, that's it. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about it was that it's funny. And through all of this, I just kept thinking, it's important that we're able to laugh during these last, forget climate, even with the unraveling of US democracy, with towering income inequality. If we're able to be buoyant enough to have a sense of humor in the face of these almost seemingly unsolvable problems, that's a good thing. And then just on a selfish level, I felt like I needed to laugh.
Yeah, I know the feeling. We're huge awards nerds here at Gold Derby, and of course you've won an Oscar for The Big Short. You were also up for Vice. You've won Emmys. You've been all over the place. You're an awards magnet. What would it mean for you to get back into the club for Don't Look Up? Would it feel different? Because, you're so passionate about the climate crisis. Is this film, of course, something that's going to make you feel even more proud if you get that nomination?
Yeah, I mean, what's great about the award stuff, and especially the Oscars, is that it's your peers. It's other writers and directors and composers and makeup and VFX, and it's the people that make movies. So I always am partial to that. And same with the Guild nominations. They're really exciting for me because we're all doing the same thing. So, I'm already very happy with the response this movie has gotten. It played for a world audience. We've heard amazing emotional responses from climate scientists, regular people who are waking up to what's going on. People are laughing. I'm hearing responses. I'm laughing, I'm crying. It's the old cliche. So it's been great. I'm very, very happy with the way the movie's rolled out. But I do think for me personally, any further success this movie could have sends a message that you can do movies about these subjects. You can play around with the way we're telling stories about these complicated times we're living in. I think that's the biggest thing. Is this is an unusual movie. It breaks form. I'm not sure what genre it is. It's comedic, it's tragic, it's dramatic. It totally shatters the Sid Field rules of screenplay writing. And it would mean a lot to me if there could be a message sent to other creatives that this is a path worth pursuing.
And the film is chock full of memorable moments. My personal favorite being the running joke of Jennifer Lawrence being completely befuddled about why a general, played by Paul Guilfoyle, would take her money and charge her for water at the White House. I would love to know the origin of this gag. I actually saw it in the theater with real life people, and every time it was brought up again, it got just as big of a belly laugh as previously.
Yeah, I mean, that joke, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite jokes as well. And that's more of a representation of like, I'll just use lazily as an example, the movie Jaws, where Quint and the oceanographer have this fight going on between each other while they're trying to fight a 24-foot great white shark. And that's kind of how life goes, right? Like we're dealing with our house on fire, yet at the same time, the Crocs we chose to wear are like aggravating our feet, and nothing's ever clean and simple. So, you know, we had that runner in the movie because that's kind of how real life feels, is that, yeah, we're going after the big thing, but there's always a bunch of little questions that are kind of niggling with you. So a lot of people have asked me what I meant by that little storyline, and people have theories about it. And my answer is there is no answer to it. It's just like real life feels. And that was really the goal of the movie, was to hopefully give people a movie or some sort of story that they could gather around and sort of share laughter and uncomfortableness and fears. And so hearing that joke landed with people just made me feel really good.
Yeah, it's one of many jokes actually that we'll hopefully have some time to talk about. I really loved how you cast Ariana Grande as, you know, the world's biggest pop star. You decided to cast the world's biggest pop star, and the original song Just Look Up from Don't Look Up is a perfect mix of humor and seriousness, like the film itself. What was it like when you finally saw the final product of the concert scene, edited with sound, music, the whole thing? What was your first reaction?
Oh my God, I was floored. I mean, this is the thing, and you guys know with movies, you know, we like to single out people, but it's 200, 300, 400, on certain days, 700 people working to put these movies together. And we were very lucky in that we had some titanic talents in Linus Sandgren, our director of photography, who's amazing. We have Nicholas Bertel, our composer, who wrote that song with Ariana and Kid Cudi. We have incredible editor Hank Corwin, who no one can cut like that guy. So my reaction, honestly, was first off, I was just amazed that we had the biggest pop star in the world singing "We're All Gonna Die." Listen to the scientists. I mean, it was so bizarre, and keep in mind, I wrote the script before the pandemic, so it was triply strange to hear her singing those words. And by the way, to her credit, she improvised those lyrics when we were doing a scratch track. So yeah, I was just floored by it and couldn't believe it. And then when they released it as a single and I heard it, I was like, this is crazy.
And I'm sure you've been asked a million questions about Meryl Streep, but forgive me for, here comes another one. What do you think Meryl brought to this role that any other actress wouldn't have been able to bring? She, of course, plays the president, a very Trumpian type character.
Yeah, she's, you know, obviously, you could argue the greatest film actor or actress ever. So there's a tremendous amount of power and weight she brings to it. But the thing that people lose in the legend of Meryl Streep are the actual skills of Meryl Streep. And on a day in, day out basis, I was just blown away by how nimble she was as an improviser, as a collaborator, as an ensemble member. I mean, her improvisational skills are off the charts. She could go all day long. She was hanging with Jonah beat for beat. We all know Jonah Hill's an incredible improviser. She was right there with him. Ask Jonah. And then what she does for your ensemble is she just radiates collaboration and selflessness. So all the other actors who obviously look up to her see this just legend being incredibly selfless, and it helps create a culture on set that I can do a little bit of, but not that much. And she really brought everything together in the movie.
Yeah, she's incredible, always has been, always will be. She plays, though, President Orling is kind of a really grotesque, awful, self-centered person who you would expect to be in the White House. We've been through it. We know what it looks like in real life. And I just love how you did that. And, there's a quick shot of her hugging Bill Clinton. So we know that she's not necessarily on the other side of politics. And I loved that. And then, of course, at the end, she meets her grisly demise. I was roaring with laughter. It was a perfect way to end that character. Why did you go that way?
Yeah, I think President Orlean, you're spot on. There's definitely a good, tablespoon of Trump in there. There's a little bit of Bill Clinton, kind of used car salesman. W. Bush's frighteningly unqualified nature is in there. And we really wanted the movie to play across the spectrum, because I think the one thing we can all agree on is the world is insane, whether you're right wing or left wing. And the dynamics of that insanity generally hover around, tunnel vision, around polls, lack of leadership, money, power, careerism. So we wanted that character to be a blend of all those elements that we've all felt for the last 40 years. And as far as her being eaten, it's a crazy story, but that was improvised. We were improvising, we were shooting the scene with her and Rylance and Jonah. And like I do all the time, I'm like, hey, we're here and we're dressed up. There's only 3 lines written. Let's try some stuff. And right away, Meryl was like, well, I want to know how I'm going to die. And I was like, that's a great question. And we did one and we improvised. And then I sort of prodded Rylance, like, maybe she gets, because she's going to survive, maybe she gets eaten by a creature on another planet. And we did like 6 or 7 takes. And by the last one, it was working. And then I had to go to my VFX people, Raymond and Dion, and tell them, we just improvised a whole VFX sequence. And he was like, excuse me? And from that point on, he was designing the Brontorok, which is literally the creature that eats her, spoiler alert. But from that point on, he was designing Brontoroks, he and Dion. So that was, I mean, that might be the world's first improvised VFX sequence. I'm not sure if there's been another.
What a trailblazer.
It'll be a Trivial Pursuit question in a few years here. You mentioned Nicholas Britell earlier. He is one of Rob and I's favorite composers working today. And you've worked with him on Succession and The Big Short and Vice. Can you talk about your guys' working relationship on this new movie, and why do you keep going back to Nicholas for all of your projects?
Yeah, Nicholas is a really unusual guy. We all know he's a brilliant, world-class pianist and composer, but he's also a guy who was a wildly successful financial guy on Wall Street, ran one of the biggest hedge funds, currency trading hedge funds. He studied psychology at Harvard. He's produced on movies. He's just a really powerful mind and touchstone. So we have an unusual relationship with Nick, where he comes in from the beginning. I show him the rough draft of the script. He and Hank Corwin, my editor, are involved right from the beginning. And I get thoughts and ideas from him. And he knew coming into it that this was the hardest movie we were ever going to do. How do you make a movie in this seismic time that we're living through of confusion and misunderstanding and fear and trepidation, and have it be funny, but also have it be dramatic? What is the tone for that? And what's so amazing about Nick is he just has a nose for the essence of a movie. And there was a moment where he said to me, it's like the people during World War II with big band music playing, and they're drinking and they feel great, yet they know they're going to die. And then he wrote that piece for the opening credit sequence. And I told him, I was like, that's the movie. It reminded me immediately of like Nino Rota being played on a crashing dirigible. Like it just had this joyful quality to it, yet at the same time sad. There's no one like Britell. He really is brilliant.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, he got the tone so right in that cue that you hear throughout the movie, and it's so bombastic at the beginning, and then of course he switches it up throughout the movie. There's no one quite like him, and I just love the way you both work together. Like to get that tone right would not have been easy. You know what though? The gag about the Comet for Jobs is probably when the movie really hit for me, when I was like, okay, I'm watching something really special. This is really kind of speaking to me personally, because it's so ridiculous and we still hear it constantly on cable news. the role of TV news and social media in this era of disinformation and politicization, and we could talk about this for hours. This movie does a great job of kind of just giving us a snapshot. I'm glad you focused on it. I'm wondering, how much Fox News did you watch to get this right, and are you okay?
Yeah, I mean, the media, the way we depict it in the movie is kind of across the spectrum.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's one of my favorite jokes in the movie is when the world is ending, we go to our Fox News stand-in, who's played by Michael Chiklis, and he says, there's only one story everyone's talking about, topless urgent care centers. And how many times in the last 5 or 10 years have we had a global crisis going on and you turn to Fox and they're doing some bizarre story? But, you know, also we took pretty hard shots at CNN, MSNBC. They have not done a good job of covering the climate crisis. I know there's really good people working there. I'm not singling out any of them. I'm just sort of, the movie is trying to ask the question of what is going on with our media, that we're looking at the biggest story in human history, scientifically speaking, in the climate crisis. And yet the coverage is woeful and sporadic and downplayed. So I think one of the reasons this movie is playing across the political spectrum is that all sides can see that it's pretty fair as far as who it goes after. And there are almost no examples in our media of people that are really working, or I'm sorry, systems or institutions that are working really hard. There are plenty of examples of people that are working hard. So yeah, we really wanted to make sure that this was a movie we could all feel, and we could feel the institutions that have been failing us on numerous accounts. I would once again even say the imminent collapse of American democracy. I would say towering income inequality. These are all stories you're just not getting a handle on if you're tuned to the regular day in, day out news.
Leonardo DiCaprio is, of course, a huge advocate of the climate problem in the world. And I imagine you guys had a lot of, it didn't take you a lot to get him to do this role. Am I guessing correctly?
Well, you know, Leo is so discriminating and so smart about every movie he does. So we actually had months and months of discussion about the movie and what the tone was going to be. And I think for DiCaprio, he's never done a movie this comedic, this wild, this unhinged. So he just really wanted to know what his character was. And so we had about 3 or 4 meetings, several phone conversations. There's no question he was drawn to it for its messaging on the climate crisis, but he's very careful and he gives very smart notes. It's no accident that this guy has done so many great movies. So yeah, it was, I really enjoyed it. I love being put through my paces. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of great actors like Christian Bale and Amy Adams and Ryan Gosling and all these amazing actors. And one thing that unifies them all is they ask every question, and it's the best. It's great.
Absolutely. Speaking of asking questions, you know, reactions on social media have been so interesting to me. I've been really following it quite closely, particularly on your feed, Dave Sroder's feed. People have absolutely adore the film, and some people are pushing back on its message. And I found that actually really surprising. I didn't expect so much noise on social media about this movie, which is great. The engagement is so high. What are your reactions? Were you expecting this?
You know, I to some degree I was. I knew that first off, you're making a comedy, and comedies never are, there's always immediately subtract 20 points for being a comedy. And then we're making a comedy that doesn't adhere to the usual comedic form. And we're making a comedy that is kind of pointing a finger at, you know, our leaders and media. And we're living in incredibly confusing times. So I'm with you. I actually love the controversy. I actually love the debate. I think critics, I think film fans should be challenging this movie, and we should be asking questions about how do we tell stories during these seismic times that we're living through. These are times like no other. I'm 53 years old. I've never seen times like these. So the passion that I saw and the anger from some viewers of the movie have been incredible. But at the same time, the overwhelming response has been positive. I mean, Netflix tracks all this stuff, and I think they told me we're 4-1 positive online. So it's overwhelmingly positive. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's great. There was a group of people that were trying to insinuate that if we were saying if you don't like this movie, you don't care about the climate, which is ludicrous. Only an insane person would say that. And the truth is, the only thing I said was, if you're freaked out about the state of the world, you are more likely to like this movie. But the opposite does not apply. So yeah, it's been heated, it's been passionate, and I support it.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for chatting with us today. If anyone has not seen Don't Look Up, I'm sorry we spoiled it, but go ahead and go watch it right now. And also a huge thanks for all the work you do on Succession. That's another huge show that Rob and I just absolutely love. So thank you and best of luck at the award season coming up.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.